Hi, this is Andrew with Infinity Cutting Tools. Today we're going to be making some beautiful plywood boxes using the Infinity lapped miter router bit set. The lapped miter is an ideal choice whenever you're making boxes out of plywood or MDF. The reason for this is, first, it produces a 45-degree edge that's going to hide that plywood edge grain that we don't want to see in our project, making it ideal for making projects out of plywood such as cabinet boxes or even drawer boxes for those cabinets. The second advantage to the lapped miter joint is that it produces a pair of 90-degree corners within the joint itself. First of all, that adds a great level of glue surface to the joint, so you're going to get a very strong joint when everything's glued up, and it also produces a joint that is self-aligning and self-squaring. So when we go to clamp up our boxes, it's going to be very easy for those miters, first of all, on the corners to line up perfectly, and also to get a perfectly square box. The locking miter is an ideal choice when working in solid wood. However, the small interlocking fingers produced by the locking miter bit tend to be quite fragile when made in plywoods or MDFs. The lapped miter joint, on the other hand, is designed and ideally suited for materials such as plywood and MDF. It produces a very durable profile that is very easy to assemble and has great glue surface, producing a very strong joint in these difficult to miter materials. We also have a couple of setup blocks available for the lapped miter router bit set, one for 3/4 inch material and one for 1/2 inch material, to make setup of these bits that much simpler. Let's go ahead over to the router table and I'll show you how I use these bits to make plywood and MDF boxes here in our shop. And I'll show you just how easy it is to set these bits up no matter what thickness of material you're using. I've gone ahead and set up the first router bit in a router table. Setup is very easy, especially with the 3/4 inch setup block. I'm going to be making my box out of 3/4 inch birch veneer plywood, and I'm going to be using my coping sled to hold the material. So I have a block that's milled to the same thickness as the base of my coping sled to give me the right offset for using my setup block. To set up the bit height, first all I want to do is run the bit up and down in the router table until I match the profile of my setup block. The key to setting up this bit is to make sure that the point of the bit right here, where the 45 and the straight portion of the bit meet, is exactly 3/8 of an inch from the bottom of my material. So as long as I have that distance, 3/8 of an inch from that point to the bottom of my material, my height's going to be set perfectly, regardless of the thickness of material that I'm using. Once I have my bit height set, I need to set my fence. To do this, I'm going to bring my fence forward till it's roughly in the right position. Then I'm going to use my setup block. I'm going to make sure that the cutter of my bit is perpendicular or square to my fence. I'm going to set my setup block in, and now I can move my fence back until my router bit meets the edge of my setup block perfectly. Now I'm perfectly set up for 3/4 inch material. If I'm using undersized material or material of a different thickness than my setup block, the only setting that I need to adjust is going to be the fence setting. If my material is thinner than my setup block is designed for, I'm simply going to bring the fence forward the same distance of the difference in thickness of material. It's that simple. Okay, I've switched out bits. I have the larger diameter bit here in my router table, and I've set the bit height. Just like with the first bit, the key is to make sure that this point here is exactly 3/8 of an inch above the bottom of our material, whether that be the table or our coping sled. The other thing to remember is this is a pretty large diameter bit, so if you are using a coping sled, make sure when you set your fence setting that you have enough clearance between the fence and the edge of the bit so you're not cutting into your coping sled. To set the fence setting, it's just like it was for the smaller diameter bit. I'm going to set my fence up, lock down one end, and I'm going to slide my setup block in, holding the setup block tight to the fence. Once my material or my setup block touches my router bit, I know I'm set correctly. Simply lock my fence down. I can do a double check, making sure everything is in the right place. Again, I'm making sure that the cutter is perpendicular or square to the fence itself. Once I have that set, I'm ready to cut my other pieces. All my pieces are cut, and you may have noticed at the end of the cut, I had a little bit of fuzz on the inside edge of my joint. This is the nature of plywood, and it's important for getting a very tight fitting joint. We take a piece of sandpaper and simply brush that fuzz off. That way, that fuzz is not going to interfere when we go to put our joint together. Gluing up the pieces of our box is very easy as well. I simply take some glue, apply it into the corner and onto the bevel. I like to spread the glue out on the bevel. Do that on both sides. Once I have that done, I'll take the other portion of the bit, put a little bit of glue into that corner, spread it out so I have a nice glue surface on both sides. Try not to go crazy with the glue so I don't have a lot of squeeze out to clean up. Once I have all 4 pieces glued up as I have here, I can simply start setting them together. Just like this. Once I have them set together, I grab my clamps, and I'm going to clamp in both directions. The 90-degree portions of this joint are going to help everything stay nice and lined up. I'm going to put a clamp this way. You can see the joint wants to self-square. Put a clamp here, and then clamp in the other direction as well. Everything pulls up nice and tight. Make sure all my clamps are nice and snug. Make sure my joints line up as I want them to. That looks good. Snug everything up. Now all I have to do is let the glue dry, do a little quick sanding to remove the glue squeeze out, and my box is done. Here's our finished box. I've gone ahead and given it a quick sanding and a coat of finish so you can see what it looks like when it's complete. If we check it for square, we can see by clamping up the box, we get a nice square corner, and we're not going to have to worry about making our boxes out of square. It really helps make a somewhat tricky project, especially with a mitered corner, much simpler. If you've been looking for a strong, durable, and visually appealing joint for making plywood boxes, the lapped miter joint is going to be the perfect choice. Easy to set up and helps make glue ups quick and easy. The lapped miter router bit set is the perfect choice for any project in plywood or MDF.